How's it going, Gopal? Gopal attended the Refi Summit earlier this year. He is a founder of Sust Global, who are among the leaders in climate analytics for a changing planet. So I'm super grateful to have Gopal on the show to talk about his experience bootstrapping a very high quality climate technology startup and what he's learned so far. And I also want to hear his perspectives on what's changed in the market. So, having said that, Gopal, can you introduce yourselves and introduce yourself, and maybe comment on what you learned this year?
Yeah, thank you, Rex. Delighted to be here, and thank you all for tuning in. So, as you all know, this has been a really interesting year. Maybe a quick intro on myself. So, I head up the tech and product functions at Sust Global as a co-founder, and we founded the business in 2020 primarily to bridge the worlds of remote sensing and climate modeling, and started a business around serving into financial services and financial data providers, which has been a very exciting ride over the last couple of years. As you all probably know, there's been growing awareness on the changing climate and incorporating that into workflows and risk assessment methodologies in different aspects of the economy. And the big learnings have been, the most around this year, which has been a very, very turbulent one, has been the ventures that have strong product market fit and very well-defined use cases have thrived. And when it comes to the big learnings related to Refi in particular, it was fantastic to attend the Refi Summit earlier this year. Lots of great learnings there. We got a chance to meet with some fantastic founders, some of who have become friends, whom I talk to on a regular basis, as we build up this growing, thriving ecosystem of players in regenerative finance. Big learning there has been, again, it comes down to this is an evolving ecosystem. We need to adapt to thrive. And the big wins often come in areas where you probably not assumed when you started the business. So keeping a broader view into potential opportunities as the market adapts and transforms in this changing economy, I think have been the big learnings for me personally.
So at Refi Summit, we had a different, interesting cross section of people. I mean, we had a lot of Web3 native, Refi native folks, like people that were founders of startups, always building in the Web3 space. And then we had some institutions from outside of Web3. And then we had a few, I guess you'd call it Web2 climate technology founders and startups that are Web3 curious, where they're like, well, we're building in Web2, at least the climate equivalent, climate technology equivalent of Web2, but they're looking at Web3 and they're like, there's something here. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I kind of want to keep an eye on it. So I think Sust Global and a couple others were a little bit in that category. So if Sust Global is kind of anchored more in climate technology in the Web2 era, how do you see next year? I mean, what is the point where Sust Global decides we're going to go all in on Web3? What's the draw?
Yeah. So maybe I should just start by describing a little bit more about what we do. So at Sust Global, we are a leading provider of climate data and analytics to the emergent climate economy. Now, we anticipate in the next 10 years, every aspect of business is going to be climate informed. And we are providing the essential intelligent climate data infrastructure to support that economy. Towards that end, I would also frame it as, Sust Global is the world's best place to build a climate-aware financial index. Today, when the businesses we serve in the financial data provider space, as well as ESG advisory businesses, are all trying to do that, using their knowledge of assets, their understanding of natural capital, to join with the changing climate towards creating rich, spatially aware, climate aware, and climate informed indices. So when it comes to the camps that you mentioned, that's totally right. We had some of the leading the thought leaders in this space around regenerative economy, like Greg Landau from the Regen Network, and from from Ren Cougar, from the Moss Earth Ventures, talk about what they're doing. So I feel like they were very much entrenched in the Web3 space. I came in definitely as like Web3 interested, having been part of like the first wave of L1 protocols that have been developed, more as like an investor and interested in seeing how this is being applied to natural capital. And I believe that there is a role to play for both Web2 and Web3 companies in the emergent refi space for two reasons. I feel like many of the ventures that are aspiring Web3 ventures are currently Web2 businesses who have tokenization and who have DLT as part of their long-term, I would say midterm to long-term product roadmap. And they might be Web2 today, but they could be dominant Web3 players in the years to come. And then there are the Web3 native businesses, some of which who have thrived and some of who have struggled because Web3 has had its own challenges with adoption, and the technical complexities are non-trivial. So from my vantage, I'm like, what are the core problems and what are the new use cases around carbon and around regenerative finance that are emerging? And how do you use a combination of existing technology, albeit Web2, and emergent technology, aka Web3, towards addressing those use cases and building new sustainable businesses?
I was on a Twitter Spaces earlier, and one of the people brought up something that I found was really interesting. They said that, like, in our existing corporate world, like this concept, this invention of double entry bookkeeping or double entry accounting, was like you've got assets and like liabilities. Like that was a revolution when they invented that. Like people just take that for granted now. And now every corporation everywhere in the world uses double entry bookkeeping. And what the blockchain offers is triple entry bookkeeping, which is you've added this element of a universal ledger. And when it comes to things like carbon and natural assets and natural capital, like the White House introduced this executive order wanting to begin tracking natural capital as part of the balance sheet. It's like you need this kind of trusted universal ledger
Yeah.
where all that natural capital is tracked, or you can't do insurance or analytics on it, because if your numbers are different from what's measured, like, and nobody has a canonical trustworthy record of how many salmon are in this location or how many animals are in this habitat, it's like you can't build any financial infrastructure on that if you can't verify it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like you raise a great point, which is it's taken years, decades, and centuries for double entry bookkeeping to become the standard, and now we're introducing a new wave of possibilities. I feel like the goals and ambitions of the refi community are massive and very, very much something that we should all be very inspired by. But we should also take into account, that there is a gestation cycle for these technologies to mature and get to a point where they're widely used. So that will take time. And you still, for the businesses that are aspiring to build out to that, they still need to find opportunities where that kind of global scale, that potential triple entry bookkeeping technology is relevant and useful in today's business landscape. So I feel like that's where entrepreneurs who had a lot of success in 2022 have actually focused their attention.
It feels like from the refi activities last year that, I mean, you've got these natural assets and like Vera credits and gold standard credits, and the Web3 community found ways to transport them onto the blockchain, and they got it working. Like they showed like a proof of concept that it works last year. And I think one of the biggest trends we're hearing a lot about is this concept of real world assets or collateralized assets.
Right.
So it seems like there's not much faith in these kind of vaporware tokens, like a Trump NFT or something that's not backed by anything. And Sam Blankman Fried and like Luna and all these things imploding.
Right.
I think a lot of the people that were on the sidelines were like, "Yep, told you so." But now you got BlackRock talking about collateralized assets, and maybe do you think that could be a potential intersection point next year for refi?
Yeah, absolutely. And like with any growing ecosystem which has new technology, there's room for technology exploitation for common good, and there's room for technology abuse. And we've seen both of that in the last 18 months, um, um, and more so even the last couple of months. So I think we're seeing the beginnings of some really good stuff around what you're describing with BlackRock. One thing that's worth distilling is when it comes to real world assets and natural capital, there is an existing market today that for, say, for example, forest carbon, right? These are numbers from like 2020. Approximately 150 million forest credits have been issued, and they limit logging and amongst those representing metric tons of sequestered carbon. These forest credits are limiting logging on approximately 5 million US acres. So think of all of the US and then think of 5 million acres. And then think about the 700 million odd acres of US forests and woodland that are not already reserved. But the amount of offset protected property is growing. So we know from this that the numbers can be really big. And if you translate, that area, credits and the acreage to dollars in terms of what's actually being provided back to the community, the people who are the stewards of this land, that's approximately $1 billion paid out to US woodland owners not to cut. And the most prolific forest offset firms have kind of represented the timber owners in parts of like the Northeast. And this is the exciting bit, which is there's money being paid out. This ecosystem is existing, albeit not entirely in Web3. It would be interesting to see if there's been some assessment around the fraction of like actual credits that are being transacted on chain versus off chain. That's a good number to track. And ideally, you want that fraction to go up over time till it hits 100. And at that point, we've realized the potential of Web3. But just in that workflow around forest carbon, there's so many user personas that can use Web2 and Web3 related tech. And I'm looking at it more from my vantage related to climate. Project pre-finance team is assessing credit risk. A project developer is looking at filtering for natural hazard when they're determining sites and evaluating within 100 acre plot which are the 5 acres they should develop, and determining where they potentially place themselves from the wildland urban interface. And then financing teams are looking at insuring against natural hazard when it comes to evaluating contractual permanence. So this all ties into a stakeholder, be it an institution or be it a corporate, needing to report on carbon-related risks in the future and report on carbon-related quality from natural hazards, natural assets that they are buying credits on. So I feel like just in the space of forest carbon, you have all these personas who could use a combination of MRV tech, which is digital, which is now getting mapped on chain, and a combination of planning, implementation, and management, which can be on chain or off chain.
It seems to me like, if you look at the traditional finance industry, it's like we've had this trend of financialization for the last 100 years, for it's like everything is more and more and more finance driven. And then yet you look outside and you're like, well, like is that tree over there insured, or is that tree tradable on any market? And a living tree versus a dead tree, because our entire financial industry is like,
Yeah.
we are only valuing a dead tree. It's like you can only buy like lumber, like and like you can only buy something once we've killed it. You can only buy gold once we've dug it out of ground and cataloged it and put it into a warehouse. And there's markets for that. And now at this point with the financial industry, it's like, like valuing those living trees and living assets, I mean, they should be more than happy. Like they want money, like, like, and the entire angle of insurance is fascinating to me because, maybe it ultimately is the insurance industry that helps us actually conserve all these things. And we need completely new financial instruments like insuring in the nation's natural capital.
Right. Absolutely. And I feel like that's where new tools and the promise of offsets really comes to life, because for the first time you're assigning value to the tree staying live rather than the trees being cut. And you created a proposition for them to be preserved and directly connected that to potential rewards to the natural ecosystem. So I feel like that's the promise of offsets. How well that's being realized is subject to debate, because you have credits being issued with limited allocation of the buffer pool. And through that, the insurance mechanism which is currently in play, which is the buffer pool for carbon projects, some say highly under capitalized and over credited. And that's the advantage I'm coming from, because you're not accounting for enough of the natural hazard. But large part of that is because we haven't had the tools or the technology to do it. Now, with the emerging climate data analytics and infrastructure, it is now possible to do that, do an informed assessment around long-term permanence and long-term durability of the credits ahead of the issuance.
How does if you're a refi project, maybe people who are listening to this, and you're bootstrapping in Web3, like how might you partner or work with Sust Global? Like how do you interface potentially with some of the existing founders, maybe?
Yeah, great question. We're actively supporting multiple of the founders in the refi space on their early projects. So primarily, one thing to know is we enable global assessments at scale. And many of the times when you're starting your venture, you're working at smaller scales. You're looking at specific geographies. It could be a blue carbon project, which is based off the coast of Myanmar, or a forest carbon project in Panama, or in South America, like Brazil. So in all those cases, the way you would interface with us is start with a conversation with myself and my team, where we can share with you around some case studies on how we've evaluated natural hazard exposure on projects, with examples of project boundaries. So if you have a project, you have a project boundary that you're actively exploring, whether it comes to pre-finance or bringing it into your marketplace, or looking at direct development towards a tokenized security, that's where we would start, which is exploring that particular project on different aspects of climate-related change indicators, and evaluating how best that can surface your assessments for the near term, and also based on climate scenarios in the future, be it high emissions, or if you're on a trajectory towards better adaptation and mitigation, which we call the green road. So that's where you would start. And one great avenue for you all to participate is we have an upcoming climate data studio that we're organizing with a few of our ecosystem partners, where we're bringing together people who have used climate data from us before, or climate data from other partners before, and who want to learn about how to use climate data and climate related analytics in how they evaluate these securities and how they evaluate these new financial instruments, and in the process also explore our data sets. So if that's of interest to you, I'll be sharing with Rex sign up form for the event we're organizing in January, and feel free to sign up. We'd love to have you there.
Thanks a lot. I'll include that link in the post when I send this out. And are there any big announcements coming from Sust Global you can share next year? Anything big to look forward to as we wrap up?
Yeah. I would say the big announcement from 2022 has been work that we have spun up related to multiple regenerative finance, as well as natural natural capital and nature-based carbon projects. We've gone public with our collaboration with Solid Burn. Interestingly, I met with the founder, not for the first time, but the second time at the Refi Summit. And we've also been working with the team at Blue Forest, both of which are case studies that are public if you want to learn more from our website. And moving into the new year, we're building an entire set of tools related to assessment of permanence and durability of carbon credits from natural hazard exposure for multiple projects. So stay tuned on more related to that and more specifics on the actual products being launched. And you can all be part of that journey as we collectively bring that together into the ecosystem for the greater good of the projects that are being spun up and the financing that goes into it and into the credits that permeate into the refi ecosystem in the years to come.
Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to speak with us. And I'm going to share some links and definitely check out Sust Global. I think you're going to have a really big year next year.
Thank you so much, Rex. All of you, thank you very much for having me. And I'm looking forward to engaging. LinkedIn is the best way to find me online. Feel free to send me a message.
Very cool. Appreciate it.